and all the viewers joining us for the fourth program of the English lecture series. We are truly delighted to have all of you with us this evening. Today's session focuses on the thought provoking theme Freud, film, and the cultural over of T.G. Vaidyanathan. It is now my privilege to introduce our uh, esteemed resource person, Professor Nikhila H. Professor Nikhila H is a professor in the Department of Film Studies at the English and the Foreign Languages University, Hyderabad. She has uh, she has nearly 3 decades of teaching experience. Her academic contributions include books, journal articles, book chapters with primary focus on cinema and gender. Over the years, she has organized several workshops and film festivals and has delivered invited lectures at numerous seminars and conferences. In 2022, she was the jury member of the Toto Fund the Arts Short Film Awards since June 2020. She has been convening an online forum dedicated to film discussions. We honored to have you with us today, madam. I would also like to take a moment to acknowledge and welcome our respected chair for today's program, Professor Baswaraj P. Donor sir, Head Department of English, Central University of Karnataka. He is one of the well-known academicians in Karnataka. He is a great translator as well. He is the driving force behind the success of Dharwad Katte and the Department of English. Before we proceed further, I would like to inform the audience that today's lecture will be delivered for approximately 60 minutes, and this will be followed by the presidential remarks by our respected chair, and thereafter we shall open the floor for discussion and interaction. Now, without taking much time, I humbly invite our esteemed resource person, Professor Nikhila H. Madam, to deliver a talk. Madam, the session is all yours.
Um, First of all, thank you very much, Shubhamai, for the introduction. I hope really to live up to all your expectations. Um, Thanks very much to Professor Basavaraj Donor. I think Sir is one of the most enthusiastic. I mean, his enthusiasm is really unbounded when it comes to such literary and cultural organizing such literary and cultural activities, not only in his university, in his department, but also as we have been seeing through Dharwad Katte for the past so many years. So I'm truly honored to be giving this talk today. And I also must register here my thanks to Dr. Nirmal Joseph. I think I've been somewhat of a troublesome speaker. A couple of times I have troubled him to reschedule this talk due to unavoidable circumstances. Thanks, Dr. Nirmal, for your patience. I'll begin my talk. It's a slightly, new kind of thought process that I'm developing here. It's not like a talk that I have delivered elsewhere or thought much about, though as I will be tracing, it's not entirely new either, in the sense that I have thought about T.G. Vaidyanathan in the context of film studies, but that was slightly different. So I have a kind of a written text which I will mostly follow, but I will also, where necessary, add certain details as I go along. I thought that when Professor Donur sent me the message, the WhatsApp message that he's inviting me to suggest thinkers whom I could possibly speak about for his Bharat in English Imagination series, I was a little stumped. Because as someone who has been associated with English studies, I began my career teaching English and literature, and now I teach film studies. So I was wondering, how can I contribute to this discussion meaningfully? I had presented Professor Donur then with two options. First, I said maybe one option could be Satyajit Ray, particularly focusing on his non-fiction writings, where Ray diagnoses the problem of commercial cinema in India as imitative of the West. So, as we all know, he had a fair degree of contempt towards commercial cinema, and he positioned himself quite antithetically against commercial cinema. And he argues for a cinema that is Indian in aesthetic. I thought it would be an interesting moment. The reason I suggested Ray was I thought it would be an interesting moment to revisit Ray's writings at this point in time, when we have today come to see commercial cinema with its song and dance sequences, with its melodrama. As for some people, it is alarmingly Indian, whereas for some others, it is quite happily Indian. So commercial cinema today, as we evaluate it, seems more Indian than Ray's own realism, which today we see as drawing heavily from French realism and Italian neorealism. So I was not very sure if that would be of interest in this series, but I did pitch this idea. And the second option that I had suggested was T.G. Vaidyanathan. While I was already quite familiar with Vaidyanathan's book, Hours in the Dark, Essays on Cinema, which was published by OUP in 1996, I had just laid my hands on the book Vishnu on Freud's desk. You can see the Vishnu on Freud's desk behind me in the background. I'll talk a little bit more about this particular image which I have in my background in a while. So I had just laid my hands on this book. It's titled Vishnu on Freud's Desk, a reader in psychoanalysis and Hinduism. It's not a book that has, I think, that has engaged a great deal of scholarly attention in recent times. I don't see too many people referring to this book. This is a book which Vaidyanathan, but it could also be simply because that way of reading psychoanalysis or even engaging with Hinduism has quite come to pass. Maybe I'll talk about that a little bit during the question answer session if there are any questions. So this is a book that Vaidyanathan has edited along with Jeffrey Kripal, and I had begun reading it for a chapter of a book on cinema that I was preparing to write. I was doing a survey of all the work that has come on psychoanalysis and cinema, so I was looking at this, though this has nothing much to do with cinema. I was looking at this book, and in this book, T.G. Vaidyanathan writes an introduction. Though the book is edited by two, the introduction is written only by T.G. Vaidyanathan. So I thought it would be a good idea to use the book and use T.G. Vaidyanathan to revisit a particular moment, a moment when the preoccupations of the English teacher in higher education became more than just teaching language and literature, and more broadly, when a shift was occurring between English's role in culturing, as we know it, and English's function as cultural studies. Though the root word is the same, that is, culture is the same for both culturing and cultural as connoters of this shift, we know that there is a world of difference. In the British context, we know this shift is traced through three important figures: Matthew Arnold, F.R. Lewis, and Raymond Williams. As we know, Matthew Arnold's ideas of culture was the pursuit of perfection through the best that has been thought and said, with literature as one of the highest expressions of culture. While for F.R. Lewis, his idea of culture was that which is preserved in the literary tradition. So literature is really at the heart of what culture is for Lewis. Literary tradition cultivated by a cultivated minority, and literature is seen as the repository, the central repository of culture. In the Lewisite view, and this is an important point, industrial capitalism, commercial publishing, cinema, advertising, popular journalism, and also later broadcasting, television broadcasting, threaten culture by encouraging passive consumption. So clearly, there is a valorization of literature as opposed to any of these. This point I will revisit, later in my talk. Raymond Williams, on the contrary, in his 1958 essay "Culture is Ordinary," is virtually pitting himself against this Arnoldian and Lewisite view of literature and culture, when he argues that culture is an entire way of life encompassing both elite and ordinary practices. That it is produced by all members of society. In fact, that it is produced by all members of society is what makes it something that is shared, and that literature is one cultural practice among many. Williams is interested in how culture is shaped by social and historical processes, including conflict. So I'm tracing this this debate as a kind of a distant backdrop, let's say, to my discussion on T.G. Vaidyanathan. I'm not suggesting that this debate gets staged exactly like this with respect to English in India. In fact, I would go on to say that it's far from that. I'm not even suggesting that TGV, as he was popularly known, is any, Williamsonian figure or even a pioneer of cultural studies. Not at all. And at this point itself, I must confess that the year I entered Bangalore University, so I completed my master's and my PhD from Bangalore University, and the year I entered Bangalore University for my master's, that is 1991, was also the year TGV had retired. I think he had retired around 1990-91. After serving the university for more than 20 years, after being appointed in Central College. I think Bangalore University had not yet formed then. So he had been appointed in 1967 in Central College. So in that sense, I'm not going to speak with any kind of personal knowledge of T.G. Vaidyanathan. I was not his student. In fact, I had neither met him when he was alive, nor did I follow his writings when he was publishing heavily on cinema in magazines and newspapers during that time. I was a student of literature, and as we know, at that point in time, literary studies had not really expanded its ambit to bring in other kinds of texts yet when I was studying in Bangalore University. So in that sense, I was not even acquainted as a student at that point in time with his writings. And he published heavily, on cinema in magazines and newspapers during that time. His 1996 book, Hours in the Dark, Essays on Cinema. This is the book. Let me hold it up for you. I think you are only seeing a mirror image of it. So this is the book. It's in fact a compilation of his articles on cinema. And these articles were written for a range of magazines and newspapers. For instance, Film World, Cinema India International, which were publications from Bombay, Deccan Herald, as we know, publication from Bangalore, News Time, publication from Hyderabad, The Telegraph, which continues to be a publication from Calcutta, and The Hindu from Madras. So virtually, any kind of serious writing on cinema in English anywhere, you could see, TGV's contribution. So though he was a writer of national standing on cinema, I knew of him only through his students. This is after my master's, when I joined Mount Carmel College to teach over there. I only knew of him from my colleagues in Mount Carmel College in the late 1990s. I learned from them that he was a very charismatic teacher, and my colleagues were in fact a part of the cult following. I'm using that word, with emphasis that TGV had then. In fact, on his death in 2002, Ramchandra Guha, with whom he co-edited the book called An Indian Cricket Omnibus in 1994, which is published by OUP, he wrote a wonderful piece in the Telegraph on TGV titled The English Teacher. And I'm quoting from it, to give you a sense of what kind of a teacher was TGV vis-a-vis his students. This is what Guha says: one must not romanticize the figure of T.G. Vaidyanathan. He could be controversial in print and overbearing in person. He enjoyed the deference of students and was puzzled or angry when this turned, as it sometimes did, to defiance. He counseled his students on career and marriage, being pleased when his advice was taken, but hostile when it was not. And while he enjoyed intelligent conversation, he enjoyed it best of all when its flow was guided, orchestrated, and dominated by himself. So this is the kind of half flattering, picture of Vaidyanathan that Ramchandra Guha paints. In fact, the article kind of tells us that he was more Bengali than a Tamilian, and he goes on to say why that was so in his write-up. It was only in 2012 at a national seminar organized by Kuvempu University on rethinking cultural studies that I spoke for the first time while tracing a disciplinary history of film studies in India about TGV's place as one of the pioneers of film studies. And this is when we didn't have anything called film studies really at that point in time. And also later, in 2019, at a national seminar in Osmania University on rethinking theories, language, literature, and culture. Again, I thought it was very apt in that seminar to speak about TGV because it was at Osmania University. And I'll now be reading a small portion from these earlier talks by way of introducing him. I'm laboring this section a little bit. I'm kind of making this point because many of you who are students of literature may not have heard or read TGV. I mean, like me, I think for many of us, TGV may just be someone we don't know anything about even now. So I will be kind of giving you this short introduction before I go on to discuss his work. TGV, as he was known, taught in the Osmania University, Hyderabad briefly before moving to the English department of Bangalore University in the late 1960s. And as I said, he retired from there in early 90s, 1990-91. He had his own place among a section of his students, but also among the film festival and film society goers, at that point in time. This was also the time of, parallel cinema, 70s, 80s, 90s, and TGV was a very important presence among film festivals and film society goers. He wrote quite prolifically, though I must say that it did not, I think, lead to any kind of curricular change. I don't have any evidence to suggest that he introduced a paper on film studies or any such thing, though his passion certainly percolated and was widely disseminated among many of his students. He wrote quite prolifically in a number of newspapers and film periodicals, but his writing was hardly journalistic or simply film reviewing. He brought to bear his literary erudition in his discussion of films, whether it was through his references to Shakespeare, Naipaul, or even the term post-colonial, which was brought into currency at a time when not too many were, using it outside of the academia. And also his skills of explication and interpretation of the meaning of particular films, and the discussion of the oeuvre of particular auteurs whom he favored, such as Satyajit Ray and Girish Kasaroli. About these, he writes passionately. His Hours in the Dark, Essays on Cinema, is a compilation of his essays, written from the 1950s to the early 1990s. The book has 5 sections. There is a section on Western cinema, so he was extremely eclectic, in his taste for cinema. There is a section on modern Indian cinema. There is an entire section on Satyajit Ray, a section on Southern cinema, and a miscellaneous section with several essays under each of these sections. That he regarded himself as a critic, and a pioneering one at that, is quite clear from the preface to his book. He writes, and I'm quoting from the preface: as a professional teacher of English literature, this quotation is also very interesting because, as I was saying, he's a figure who, in whom we can see this shift from, English as connoting literature in a somewhat classical sense or canonical sense, and other kinds of interests which were other than literary, that is. So as a professional teacher, and this is what he says about himself, I found myself in the late 50s and early 60s in a bit of a no man's land. Serious film criticism was virtually unheard of. I should pursue my career, I was told, and deck myself out with a PhD. I had just edited the Shakespeare quarter centenary number for the Osmania Journal of English Studies at Osmania University, and my dogged persistence in film criticism seemed rank folly. To make matters worse, there were very few models to emulate. End quotes. He regarded the critic as an artist, and he wrote about the qualities of a good critic in this fashion. The critic must not only have the ability to clinically describe fulcromatic moments, but also an evocative style that brings vividly alive moments of sheer splendor. So as we can see here, as in the case of literary criticism, he tries to cast the critic as central to the experience of cinema. Cinema is something that is not accessible to everyone, that it needs the critic to mediate between the screen and the spectator. To the criticism that his film criticism is literary and bookish, TGV proffers that Indian art filmmakers, including Ray, are bookish. So, hence, my criticism is also bookish, he would say. As in the case of literature, the attempt in the sphere of cinema is also to sift not just good from bad, but to define what can be called cinema. It was all about educating and making for a discerning audience for such a cinema. He was not just borrowing. He was not just borrowing, terminology such as denouement, pathetic fallacy from literary criticism, but he was actually turning cinema into an art, with a capital A. Which is modeled on literary art. The preface again sets the tone for the kind of cinema that are discussed in the pages that follow. Though, to be fair to him, he wrote about all kinds of cinema, though he had a very strong opinion about art cinema, or in favor of art cinema. Art cinema, he writes, differs from its bastard cousin, commercial cinema. Where art cinema succeeds, as in Kasaravalli's Mane or M.T. Vasudevan Nayar's Nirmalyam, the objective correlatives are found and conveyed with surpassing excellence. Commercial cinema, he says, is happily free of this obligation, since it assumes the result, and hence, instead of objective correlatives, it substitutes ready-made and stock melodramatic situations to achieve its ends. Hence, as in the runaway success of Hum Aapke Hai Kaun, it reaffirms the governing ideological culture. It cannot and will not examine them. So we see that this comes, where this comes from, from, you might almost say, it is Lewisite, or has echoes of Lewis, or the demands that Lewis made on literature, now brought into the realm of cinema. In an essay where he provides an overview of Kannada cinema, after he alludes to Dr. Rajkumar in 2 paragraphs. This is a whole essay on Kannada cinema, and there are 2 paragraphs on Dr. Rajkumar where he calls him, again I'm quoting, the Alpha and Omega, the patron saint and the presiding deity of Kannada cinema. But the rest of the essay is actually a discussion of the masterpieces of Kannada cinema, from Samskara to Adi Shankaracharya, which, as we know, is a Sanskrit film, but that also is discussed in the canon of Kannada cinema, Kannada art cinema. At the end of the essay, he sets down his vision for Kannada cinema. And this is what he says. Kannada cinema, if it is to do more than win national awards, must develop a new sensibility. This sensibility must be urban. Its rhythms must be more nervous, more staccato and discontinuous. And the lifestyles it portrays must be less conceptually oriented, less intellectual, less dichotomous. It must become less and less a vehicle of stale ideas, moral commonplaces, or glib political homilies. Like the donkey, it must get the smell, the fleas, and the dirt of Karnataka, and not merely the culture, the heritage, and the wonder that is Karnataka, which can surely take care of themselves. So this is his assessment. Reading it now, it seems somewhat contradictory to what he regards as the masterpieces and what he sets down as the dictum for Kannada cinema. One striking feature then of Vaidyanathan's career is that he was writing seriously about cinema at a time when film studies scarcely existed as an academic discipline in India. Not that it is in any way widespread in India, but in the 90s it was virtually non-existent. His essays in Hours in the Dark suggest that he approached cinema not simply as entertainment or as an extension of literary narrative, but as a cultural text deserving the same interpretive seriousness as literature. This was somewhat unusual among English departments in the 1970s and 80s, and it anticipates the later institutional emergence of film studies and cultural studies within the academia. So, though he did not actually, in any significant way, bring film studies or cultural studies within the ambit of the academic classroom, within the ambit of the classroom, by taking films seriously, he was creating a discourse that these are texts that can be looked at and engaged with academically and seriously. And that is why I see him as a pioneering figure of film studies in India. So what I have read so far is, as I said, my assessment of where I was trying to build a kind of historiography of film studies in India through a few key figures, and I had, talked about Vaidyanathan in that context. Now I will move to his other writings and also give you my own sense of, why I think Vaidyanathan is an interesting figure to look at this point in time. Although Vaidyanathan eventually moved well beyond Leavisite criticism, his intellectual formation clearly bears traces of the Cambridge tradition. Several features of his work suggest this inheritance. For instance, his close reading of texts, including film texts, and later, as we will see, virtually Indian civilization is, becomes the text that he will read. Also, his concern with moral seriousness, his attention to language, not just in the language in the sense we know as students of English, but language also in terms of filmic language, and the belief that literature enlarges ethical understanding. However, unlike a strict Leavisite, he refused to confine literary criticism to the canon. He drew equally upon Indian myths. I think he's part of a milieu in the 80s and 90s, as we know with, figures like Karnad, Kambara. There is a great deal of engagement, also a somewhat critical engagement with myths. I think he's part of that milieu. He drew equally upon Indian myths, on psychoanalytic theory, on cinema, devotional traditions, anthropology, and cultural history. One could say that he retained Lewis's seriousness while abandoning, Lewis's literary exclusiveness. In the rest of my discussion today, I will consider three other significant writings by TGV. First, his essay titled Authority and Identity in India. This was published in Daedalus Journal in 1989. Then I will consider the introduction to the volume he edited, as I mentioned, along with Jeffrey Kripal, Vishnu on Freud's Desk, a reader in psychoanalysis and Hinduism, which is published by OUP in 1999. As I said, though it's an edited volume, the introduction is written by TGV alone. So I will consider that introduction. And also the introduction he wrote to the volume, The Essential Writings of Sudhir Kakar. So he writes a very expository, a kind of very long introduction to the compilation, Sudhir Kakar's Essential Writings, which is a compilation of essays written by the psychoanalyst Sudhir Kakar. So I will consider mainly, these three texts in the rest of my discussion. I hope I'm okay with regard to time. Okay. Unlike the move outlined earlier, from the culturing function of English to the turn to cultural studies, it is, that happened in the British context. It is important to see how a figure like TGV, while expanding the canon in the mode of cultural studies, hardly abandoned the humanist concerns of English and literary studies. His work actually suggests quite a different trajectory, one that moved not towards the sociology of culture or even the politics of representation. So very unlike, let's say, Raymond Williams or Stuart Hall, but towards what may be called comparative humanism. An interdisciplinary inquiry into the symbolic systems through which cultures, and in this case, he's very much centrally concerned with Indian culture, Indian civilization, through which cultures imagine selfhood, authority, desire, faith, and identity. The Daedalus essay marks an important intellectual turning point, I would think. Although written by a professor of English, the essay is striking for the almost complete absence of literary criticism in the conventional sense. He does not, he's not, this is not an essay where he's taking a particular text and analyzing it. Though, as we will see, I will talk about, as I talk about it, he does, refer to samskara. He does refer to Raja Rao's Serpent and the Rope, in the text. But it's not, but that is not his central preoccupation in the essay. Instead of analyzing, any novel or poem, TGV analyzes Indian civilization itself. And today, it seems like, it seems like the canvas is so vast, and we might even ask, so what is it? His objects of inquiry include religious traditions, family structures, philosophical concepts, colonial history, and psychological formations. The unit of analysis is no longer the literary text, but culture itself. Also, it's somewhat timely that today being Guru Purnima, that I'm actually talking or going back to this essay, because one of the things he says, the dominant principle, and I'm quoting here from him, it is my belief that the dominant principle that is to be found in Indian civilization, he would say, is Guru Shishya relationship, which links not only Krishna and Arjuna on the troubled battlefield of Kurukshetra, pictured in the Bhagavad Gita centuries ago, but also Gandhiji and Nehru in yet another chapter of her history that has not quite concluded. The essay is a kind of, it's sweeping in its scope. It talks about what he kind of claims to say as the features of Indian civilization, and the adherence to authority. So he goes on to talk about, how for Indians adherence to authority is central. But the defining principle, as I said, is the Guru Shishya tradition. And he says, you might think that this is a top down or it's a kind of dominating approach, but it's not about the Guru dominating over the Shishya. It is the Shishya actually choosing the Guru. And he ends the essay with a very interesting kind of paragraph. As students of literature, I think you will, this paragraph will resonate with you. He's quoting from Raja Rao's Serpent and the Rope. No, not a god, but a guru is what I need. Lord, Lord, my guru, come to me, tell me, give me thy touch, vouchsafe. Ramaswamy cries, much like the Acharya in Samskara. The vision of truth, Lord, my Lord. So, and then this is his gloss, that is TGV's gloss on this cry. Increasingly, it seems the disoriented modern Indian is like Arjuna in the battlefield of Kurukshetra, in need of a guru. As India becomes more confused, it seems less in need of gods, it needs gurus. This is how he ends his essay. The essay seeks to explain a central paradox, that is, how authority and identity have historically been constituted in India. TGV argues that Indian conceptions of authority differ significantly from dominant Western models, because authority is not understood primarily in terms of autonomous individual, an autonomous individual who is confronting institutional power. Rather, it is embedded in kinship, religious traditions, caste, myth, ritual, and inherited symbolic structures. Identity, correspondingly, he says, is relational rather than radically individualistic. He says, and I'm quoting him, it's not surprising that for many Indians, insecurity is nearly always a consequence of the withdrawal of external authority, but never of its presence. Later, he goes on to say, self-presentation for the Hindu is usually in social terms. That is, how you identify yourself as so-and-so's wife or so-and-so's son or daughter, etc. Never in personal or even in the Guru Shishya tradition that you are a chela of this guru or something like that, or you follow that tradition. Never in personal or occupational terms as it is for the Westerner. He talks of how even today more Indians feel the conflict and pull of the guru principle or allegiance to a master or authority over other ideals enshrined in the preamble of the Indian Constitution. And as I read out for him, he seems to suggest that for Indians, the need for gods is less than the need for gurus. The essay does not celebrate this relationship uncritically. Instead, it asks how these historically sedimented structures continue to shape modern subjectivity even in post-colonial India. So it's not like he's saying that, this is perfect, that the Guru Shishya Parampara is perfect, our civilization is great because of this. It's a diagnosis. The essay is more in the form of a diagnosis. So what is it that happens to us as a result of believing in, the Guru in this fashion? So it's more like that. What is remarkable is the method. The essay.
No.
Sorry, can I go on?
Yes, madam.
The essay moves effortlessly between psychology, anthropology, religious studies, philosophy, history, and cultural analysis without abandoning the interpretive habits of a literary critic. Vaidyanathan is still reading closely, but he is now reading civilization rather than novels, With respect to the introduction, with the next, text of his that I'm moving to, with respect to the introduction to Vishnu on Freud's desk, I think it's interesting for a number of reasons. To begin with, the title itself has an interesting story behind it, which TGV recounts. In 1931, Girindra Shekhar Bose, who was the founder of the Indian Psychoanalytical Society, something like that actually existed in 1931, who had started correspondence with Freud nearly 60 years before that, that is towards the latter half of the 19th century itself. Correspondence with Freud nearly 60 years before that, sent an insured parcel to Freud consisting of an ivory statuette of Vishnu on a mahogany base. This was apparently a present to Sigmund Freud on his 75th birthday. I don't know how well you can see the image behind me, but that's the statuette that Girindra Shekhar Bose sent to Freud in 1931. TGV writes that Freud had gratefully acknowledged Girindra Shekhar's gift and had replied to him. It seems Freud had written to him saying, "The statuette is charming." He wrote in reply on 31st December 1931. "I gave it place of honor on my desk," and that's where the title of this book comes from, Vishnu on Freud's desk. "I gave it place of honor on my desk. As long as I can enjoy life, it will recall to my mind the progress of psychoanalysis, the proud conquests it has made in foreign countries, and the kind feelings for me it has aroused in some of my contemporaries at least." Later, when the wood and ivory miniature developed cracks, it seems Freud had mused, "Can the god being used to Calcutta not stand the climate in Vienna?" The cobra-headed ivory Vishnu took its place among Freud's collection of Greek, Roman, and Egyptian statuettes at his house at Burgess 19. I think now it is preserved in the London Museum, if I'm not wrong. The introduction to this book, which he writes, Vishnu on Freud's desk, begins from what TGV sees as a kind of intellectual paradox. Freud has become one of the foundational thinkers of modern Western thought. In fact, it begins very interestingly with, Brihadaranyaka Upanishad, and he's talking about how in the Brihadaranyaka Upanishad there is this reference to the origin myth, the split that happens, and then the coming together of man and woman, which constitutes the origin myth, which again later gets reflected in Plato, and he wonders, what is it? I mean, did Plato know about Brihadaranyaka Upanishad? Where is it coming from? So he takes off from there. The introduction begins from what TGV sees as an intellectual paradox. Freud has become one of the foundational thinkers of modern Western thought, profoundly influencing literary criticism, as we know, anthropology, philosophy, film theory, feminist criticism, and also cultural studies. Yet his engagement with non-Western religions, especially Hinduism, remained fragmentary, indirect, and often dismissive. He talks of how, most of the biographers of Freud hardly refer to have anything to say about Freud's engagement with Indian thought, in particular, or Eastern thought more generally. Though it seems like Freud seems to have read and educated himself quite a bit about various Indian texts. Conversely, Hindu philosophical and religious traditions developed extraordinarily sophisticated accounts of desire, memory, dreams, sexuality, repression, selfhood, illusion, transcendence without ever encountering Freud. So it seems like this is the encounter that TGV is kind of willing through this book this coming of face to face between between Freud and Hinduism or non-Western religious thinking. This seems to be something that he's willing. I'm not saying that his own introduction does this in any spectacular fashion, but certainly many of the essays in the book are worth reading, including the Girindra Shankar essay, the Girindra Shekhar's essay, the first psychoanalyst and the founder of Psychoanalytical Society in India. His essay too is wonderfully evocative. It tells us how he departed from, how and why he departed from Freud, and how he conceptualized the Oedipus complex and so on. Therefore, he asks, what happens when these two traditions are placed in genuine dialogue rather than being treated as mutually exclusive systems? The introduction refuses to reduce Freud to a clinical psychologist. Instead, psychoanalysis becomes a method of interpretation. We can see this. That's why I said in the beginning, TGV seems to be part of this period when people like Ashish Nandi, Sudhir Kakar are using psychoanalysis to unpack various cultural texts. As we know, Nandi writes extensively on cinema at this point in time. So TGV seems to be part of that milieu. Instead, psychoanalysis becomes a method of interpretation. Dreams, rituals, myths, literature, films, fantasies all become texts requiring interpretation. TGV's introduction. Now I'm moving to the third text in this phase. TGV's introduction to the Sudhir Kakar volume is more expository. He's mostly summarizing the various essays in the volume. He classifies Kakar's work into recurring thematic clusters such as childhood, identity, healing, sexuality, religion, mysticism, imagination, and so on. He then shows how these apparently disparate essays are connected by a common psychoanalytic concern with Indian culture. Although he is introducing Kakar, TGV repeatedly highlights certain things. So again here, as with Freud, he's not interested in Kakar's clinical practice, but more with Kakar's technique of psychoanalysis, his psychoanalytical technique, which he kind of extrapolates to read various kinds of texts. Instead, he emphasizes imagination, symbolism, religious experience, myth, cultural memory, identity. I'm mentioning these keywords because I think today they resonate with many of us. So many of research scholars are, working on ideas like myth or cultural memory. So in this context, it's interesting to revisit TGV, where he's bringing these ideas within the ambit of interpretive study, bringing it using a kind of hermeneutics, a hermeneutic method to understand these texts. In other words, he reads Kakar less as a psychoanalyst than as a cultural interpreter. Kakar, of course, is a far more controversial thinker than TGV allows him to appear. Kakar's writings have been criticized for psychologizing Indian culture, for essentializing Hindu identity. I mean, you can say all this of TGV as well, relying on broad civilizational generalizations, moving rather freely between ethnography and speculation. The introduction rarely addresses any of these tensions. Instead, it presents Kakar as a remarkably coherent thinker. In that sense, it's more appreciative, rather descriptive, rather than critical. So at first glance, looking at these three writings, one might be tempted to locate this work, of TGV's within the ambit of cultural studies. Certainly, TGV broadens the archive beyond canonical literature. Like cultural studies, he insists that meaning is produced not only through literary texts, but also through rituals, myths, cinema, religious narratives, and philosophical traditions. Yet, the resemblance should not be overstated. The Birmingham School, exemplified by Stuart Hall, approached culture primarily through questions of ideology, hegemony, media, race, class, and power. And Raymond Williams, as mentioned earlier, defined culture as a whole way of life, emphasizing the historical production of meanings within specific social formations. TGV's concerns, I mean, I'm not using these as a kind of benchmark to evaluate TGV. I'm only saying that it's a different trajectory, that TGV's work takes in the Indian context. TGV's concerns are markedly different. His recurring questions are not primarily political, but really hermeneutic. How is the self imagined? Let's say in Indian philosophy, how is the self imagined? How does desire shape religious experience? How do myths organize collective memory? What constitutes authority in Indian civilization? How do civilizations explain suffering? How do symbolic systems mediate identity? So it's these kind of questions that he's engaging with, rather than the kind of concerns that Raymond Williams or Stuart Hall addressed in the British context. His scholarship therefore belongs less to cultural studies in that sense, or even what cultural studies has come to be in the Indian context later on. Thinking of my colleagues like Suzy Taru and Madhav Prasad, when I'm thinking of cultural studies in the Indian context broadly. So his scholarship therefore belongs less to cultural studies than to broader traditions of interpretive anthropology, comparative religion, psychoanalytic criticism, and philosophical hermeneutics. This is what makes Vaidyanathan historically significant. He undoubtedly emerges from the Lewisite tradition of English studies. One can detect throughout his writings an enduring commitment to close reading, moral seriousness, the belief that interpretation enlarges human understanding. But he simultaneously, as I said, rejects Lewis's literary canon. The privileged status once accorded to novels and poems is now extended to myths, rituals, films, dreams, philosophical texts, and so on. At the same time, he does not fully embrace the materialist orientation of cultural studies. Unlike Hall or Williams, he's less interested in ideology, class formation, or institutional power than in the symbolic organization of human experience. His work, therefore, occupies a distinctive position between a traditional literary criticism, the culturing task of literary studies, and cultural studies itself. His idea of Indian culture, or even when he talks about the Indian psyche, for instance, or Indian civilization, all these operate at a very high level of abstraction. And most of the time he seems to be talking about Sanskrit texts, like when he alludes to Brihadaranyaka Upanishad, as I mentioned earlier. They flatten any kind of internal differences. He's more a thinker of symbolic coherence than a theorist of social conflict, and his unit of analysis is civilization, not a social formation. Civilization, as a block, as it were, and not a particular social formation. Let me close this talk by quoting another scholar who wrote about TGV on his death. In 2002, in Ashish Nandi, in his homage to T.G. Vaidyanathan, wrote that his death marks the beginning of an end of a particular style of teaching and scholarship. And Nandi wrote, intellectual work too is getting steadily professionalized, and the days of grand amateurs and rounded Renaissance figures seems to be over. I think this would be broadly the analysis of TGV today. A broad Renaissance figure who dabbled equally, with ease with literary texts as with cinema and Indian culture and Indian civilization in a very broad sense. I think I'll stop here. Yeah, it's over to Shubhamai. Yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you so much, madam, for your illuminating and intellectually enriching lecture. Now I respectfully invite our chairperson, Professor Suraj P. Donor sir, to deliver the presidential remarks.
Good evening. Am I audible, Submoy?
Yes, sir.
Dear viewers of Dharwad Katte, warm greetings and heartfelt congratulations to all the viewers of Dharwad Katte on the auspicious occasion of Guru Purnima. Let us pay our humble respects to our gurus, whose wisdom has illuminated our lives. May we in turn carry forward this light by inspiring, guiding. H delivered her talk for about 60 minutes, and this is one of the very important thought-provoking talks delivered by the scholars from the Harvard Katte platform. Professor Nikhila H is one of the country's most distinguished academics. Through her profound lectures, rigorous scholarship, and insightful writings, she had made a lasting impact on students and scholars of cultural studies and film studies across the nation. I'm an admirer of her. I'm an admirer of her scholarship. I have listened to her on many occasions. She always visits our department, the Department of English at Central Institute of Karnataka, Dharwad. And my research scholars, my colleagues, and my students, UG, PG students, also admire her scholarship. And some of my students have joined online to listen to her. Professor Nikhila Madam's today's talk will be remembered for a long time. It was an illuminating and intellectually enriching presentation with remarkable clarity and depth. Professor Nikhila offered brilliant insights into GT Vaidyanathan, that is GT Vaidyanathan, Vaidyanathan's intellectual legacy. Professor Nikhila tried to explore T.G. Vaidyanathan's intellectual and cultural contributions through the intersecting lenses of psychoanalysis, cinema, and spirituality. I shall try to add a few observations of mine to what Professor Nikhila has already said. I have already informed you that this is one of the most brilliant talks delivered from Dharwad Katte. It is a comprehensive talk, so I did not say anything about what Madam has said, but let me add some observations to what Madam has said. I also read T.G. Vaidyanathan, but I'm not a student of either film studies or culture studies. I'm a student of theater and also translation. But I have always admired the writings of T.G. Vaidyanathan because he happens to work in Bengaluru, and he also happens to be the one of our brilliant professors of English. And through Nikhila Madam's presentation and also through some of my friends, framework for understanding. I'm talked about Indian civilization. Certain limitations, for example, TG might have also talked about or written about feminism and other important to Professor Nikhila H, who is an authority on cultural studies and film studies, and her 1 hour presentation gave us an idea about quite aware of the limitations of Freudian and request you to again come back to the Katte and give us a lot of information. To interact with Professor Nikhila H.
Name that, ma'am. I just skipped that to write.
Yeah, it's called Hours in the Dark, Essays on Cinema. So this is the book. I don't know. I think due to the demands of publishing in newspapers and magazines, how at a certain point of time films were evaluated by the literati.
Okay. Ma'am,
Looking at work, see, Girish Kasaroli is one of the most researched authors. Very fortunately, useful for your work. There are a number go to deep focus.
Sure. Thank you, ma'am. Thank you.
Ask the question yourself if.
May I ask a question?
Oh yes, sir.
Yeah. Good evening to Nikhila and others. I came very late, so I'm not going to talk entirely about your presentation. I think I came at the end of the talk. I heard you 15 minutes, and where you were making reference to Raymond Williams, Stuart Hall, and others. I'm just curious to know, it's a rudimentary question. Can you throw more light on if TGV was aware of what was being done by, or what are the thoughts of Raymond Williams with regard to culture, with regard to other things? Could you have done more with regard to film criticism with the insights offered by Raymond Williams, or was it a deliberate on the part of TGV to dissociate himself from Raymond Williams and feel more close to people like Ashish Nandi?
I would see TGV or even Ashish Nandi more to unpack Indian milieu that we must place Vaidyanathan Vaidyanathan on Hours in the Dark. It's not even that it's a consistently used. When you read it, you would say it sounds like so. I mean, pitting the West versus India in such stark terms. So, an intellectual moment of transition where English came.
A suggestion to you, think about it, because I was also trying to pick.
I mean,
it's good that he was not exposed.
Yeah, what I'm trying to point out. Perhaps Nikhila madam can throw more light on that.
In fact, that's what is interesting about the blind spots. How come, the blind spots? How come, so much a contextual way of kind of bringing Freudian method and Freudian psychoanalysis to reckon with a very different. So one of the criticisms against psychoanalysis is that it is ahistorical and not a mere application.
to this series. I extend my heartfelt thanks to our respected chairperson, Professor Vas.
Thank you. Thank you.